Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Geeky Waffle. I'm Hope, and I am so excited about our special guest today to talk about one of my favorite shows. He is the creator of the YouTube channel SupergeekMike, giving you the breakdown of how to get started with D&D, Tabletop, and will also demystify some Critical Role for you. Welcome to the channel, Mike Christensen. Hi.
Hello. Thank you so much, Hope. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm super excited too. I'm actually a really big fan of your channel.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's so helpful what you do. Like, I just started my first tabletop game, and I've just been binging a lot of your videos.
What are you playing?
I'm playing Star Wars 5e.
Okay.
So it's also crazy because I'm doing it as a podcast with my friends. So I'm learning live on the fly for people to listen to.
That is a journey. Yep, I've been through that as well.
Yeah, but it's a lot of fun, and I really am learning a lot, but your videos are really great. If people are not familiar with your content, give me a rundown of what you do on your channel.
Yeah, my whole goal is to help people basically figure out their style of play. Everything boils down to that in some way. That includes going to episodes of Critical Role and breaking down why do they work? What's working about them? What can we learn from them? Which parts maybe wouldn't work for everybody, or did they end up not doing as much as the show went along because their style changed? But that also goes to just bigger topics about TTRPGs, like problem players and certain styles of play and campaign settings and down the road different games besides just D&D. Because obviously D&D is not right for everybody's style, and 5e is a system I like a lot, but not everybody likes it. And it's almost 10 years old. It's showing its seam. Like so many other YouTubers, that is a goal of mine as well. But basically just to help players and GMs think about what they want to do with their games and try not to give just black and white, right or wrong. You must do this. You must. Not always doable. There are some things where I have a strong opinion, but generally just try to make the viewer think about different options for their own games.
We are actually not here to talk about D&D, though I would love to pick your brain because I'm learning. The reason I wanted to have you on was to talk about the Legends of Vox Machina. And you are a longtime fan of Critical Role, and you know the stream so well. And I'm a new fan.
Yes.
I watched the show and your videos, so I would say I'm a casual fan who knows who Tiberius is now. I wanted to talk about it from the point of view of somebody who knows Critical Role so well versus me, who's just a newbie and along for the ride. But first of all, what is some of your history with Critical Role and tabletop games in general, and what is it that you love about both the stream and the show?
Yeah, so I'll start with my history with the game overall is in college. I didn't play until college, and I came home and my roommates were rolling up characters. They're like, hey, we're getting ready to play D&D. Do you want to join? I was like, no, I think I'm okay. And then I heard them describing just characters, and I was like, oh, this actually sounds cool. You just make up characters, and I was like, all right, well, I'll just be a casual, I got to do something that will offset how nerdy this is. So what I'll do is I'll draw fake comic book covers for every session based on Marvel comics I own, because that shows that I'm less invested somehow. I don't know.
That's cool. I can't believe you say that's really cool, though.
No, exactly. It was now I understand, I was making fan art of our games. I was way deep in it. I was so excited, but I didn't understand. I didn't have the words for that yet. And I was write my notes as if they were the in real world journalings of my character. I was I was deep in the paint very quickly. And so I've been playing since 2007. And then thankfully, when I started catching up with Critical Role, they only had 25 episodes or so that will never, ever happen again. So that's the perfect time.
That is why it's so daunting for me. And that's why I like your channel so much, because I was like, that first few episodes are a trudge to get through.
Yeah, that sound audio is tough. It helped to know there was a good chunk and people were talking about it. I don't remember even how I heard about it at the time, but to be able to binge it pretty quickly and get to the Briarwood arc and for the weekly releases, or maybe it was at the end of the Briarwood arc. I know I was watching live when the Chroma Conclave arc started, because that is basically why I know Critical Role as well as I do, is because I was watching it weekly and I would go back and re-listen to episodes and all of that. So, I've been watching ever since, although I have to admit, I'm a little behind on Campaign 3.
That's all right.
Starting a YouTube channel does take away some of your free time.
You're very much beating me, so you're fine. But what is it that you love about Critical Role and in terms the Legend of Vox Machina?
I think that I talk a lot about style on my channel. I think their style is really similar to mine in terms of how they play their game and what they enjoy. It lines up with what I like about D&D a lot. It was really fun watching that first year of the show and going like, ooh, okay, I could have done this instead of this. And because the show was so similar already to like what my players enjoyed, it lined up really nicely. I'm not going to say I got it right away in terms of what every DM who likes Critical Role does is try to translate some of what they like into the game. And I had some missteps there. So that's part of why I do the videos I do, is so I can actually offer someone some guidance about how to do that more successfully than I did. But it just works really well with the people I play with, really enjoy role playing, and that sort of focus on role playing is a really nice alignment for me. I also just think the story of Vox Machina, and in turn the cartoon, is just like right up my alley. It is a very generic, is a more uncharitable term, but like a very tropey, high fantasy story that's just told really well. The analog I always make is that it's a lot like the movie Tangled. It's like, yeah, this isn't anything we haven't seen before.
You better be careful. That is a favorite movie on this channel, and we will fight you.
No, my point is,
negative things.
There's nothing in Tangled that you haven't necessarily seen before, but it's all done so well. And Vox Machina works very much the same way. I think that's why later campaigns of Critical Role, I compare campaign 2 more like Frozen. Not perfect, but they're experimenting a lot more, trying things that we haven't seen 1,000 times. There's going to be a couple moments of friction, but overall, I understand why some people really love campaign 2, because it is a little bit more experimental and a little bit more off the tropes. But man, I love me the tropes. That's why I enjoy Vox Machina as well as I do, is because it's basically like, yeah, you have to go find some magic items and fight some dragons. We've all seen that before. But what if it was also really good? Because that's not always the case.
I know for me, like, what caught my eye about it is I'm the residential like animation person for the Waffles. And I had been wanting for so long, like a really good adult animated show that wasn't in like the vein of like Family Guy or Bob's Burgers, which nothing is wrong with those shows. But to have a adult fantasy show that's animated and actually deals with like adult problems. I did not expect Scanlan to have a daughter.
Yep.
By the way, how old is Scanlan?
A running joke question on the live stream was him never answering that question, but gnomes live for a long time. So that basically
Okay. Because I thought he was like way younger, and then when Kaylee showed up, I was like, oh, sister.
And then the next question is, how old is Kaylee? It's because we don't really know how old. If Scanlan is in his, we'll say, 30s or 40s, which, or gnome equivalents, Kaylee could be as young as
like 20.
18 or early 20s. Like, they don't pin that down to hard numbers the way that you have to do in a role-playing game, because you like have a box you need to write in your age for all the characters. And like, they're with that. For the most part, really the only person age who really matters is Percy, because how old he was when everything happened in Whitestone and how long that's been is like plot relevant information.
Yeah. But what I really like about like Vox Machina is it really has filled this like niche and is one of the few shows that's making a really good adult animated show that has characters with depth. Because that's my jam. I love character-driven shows. And what's more character-driven than D&D?
Yep.
So, like, yeah, it just hit every box that I've been wanting in a show. And now to know that Mighty Nine is coming, know nothing about Mighty Nine, but I'm like super pumped.
The other thing, too, I think that is very, like works really well in Vox Machina as a cartoon is that the style is very similar to the kinds of things we grew up with. Mm-hmm. It pulls the same trick that Invincible pulled in 2021, which is to say like, hey, this looks like other things you might have watched when you were younger, but like, what if the actual things that would have happened then went on to happen? Like, what if people did curse? What if there was more blood, like a lot more blood? So being able to tie that into how we always sort of like wished things were when we watched whatever fantasy shows that we grew up with lends itself well to a new audience as well.
I also think it does with too, but like, because you say it has all these tropes, but it's not like overly meta.
Yeah.
And I like that about it. Like, I love Owl House. It's one of my absolute favorite shows in the world, but being a show about young gay witches in a magic school, they definitely throw jokes all the time at Harry Potter and She Who Must Not Be Named. But it doesn't feel like this at any point is just like, oh, you grew up with like Lord of the Rings, look at our ring of power, blah, blah, blah. You know, it never feels like it's overly meta except for with itself, which is fun for me because I don't know the meta. So I'm just like, oh, this is just like really good world building.
Yeah, because meta is because we are all so much more filmically literate and movie literate than we used to be because of the internet, because of we all can find a podcast that breaks down every episode of every show we've ever heard of. Meta is a language that a lot of filmmakers and television writers use now to communicate with their audience. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I think you're right. They have really resisted the urge to point out too many comparisons in a way that we've all heard before. They're not doing no one would really fault them if they did the Deadpool thing, where they were like, oh, we know what happens next, but like, that's not their style of storytelling for this campaign or for this show. I think it also helps that when you have that kind of conversation at a D&D table, it's not assumed to be in character. The characters in your game haven't seen aliens. They don't necessarily know anything other than, hey, this seems bad. And you can say this seems bad without saying, game over, man, game over. Like, ways to still communicate the sentiment of, yes, we know something might happen, without saying, we've all seen this 100 times, which is a rare thing, rarer than it ought to be these days.
Oh, yeah. So getting to season 2 a little bit, from my understanding, the Crema Conclave was like this like really massive story. And to me, I think it's definitely a much bigger accomplishment than season 1, which nothing about the Briarwood arc, but it's a lot more straightforward. Like, get to the White Stone, beat the Briarwoods, save Percy's home. Like, it's a much more straightforward story. Yeah. The Crema Conclave is so massive. You have all these magical MacGuffins, and now there's sphinxes, and all this stuff is happening. You're teleporting all these different ways. And so I was wondering, I know that they have made a lot of changes in the original stream. And what are your thoughts on the adaptation and how they took hundreds and hundreds of hours and put it in like these 12 episodes for Crema Conclave?
I've been fascinated. First of all, I've known for a long time, like, how are they going to do this? Because the Briarwood arc runs from episode 24 to 32, roughly.
It's not that long.
It's not that long. Those are long episodes, but it almost lines up like one episode per one episode of the cartoon. Not exactly, but there's a similar enough vibe that, like, if they moved a couple things around as far as like where an episode started or ended, you could still condense things tremendously and have the exact same story. There were some superficial changes. Obviously, being able to cut away to Pike was something they didn't have the opportunity to do before, because the reason that she left the game was because she was filming Blind Spot. They took a small story beat that happened to her before she left for Blind Spot and like used that, tied it into and made it its own longer subplot, and then tied in that into the return to the group. It's a very smart way to do that. The Crema Conclave arc is a lot tougher because basically they're level 13, 14 or whatever. And Matt basically just says, hey, this major thing happened. Do what you will with that information. And they have to say, like, okay, we've been to some other places. Let's go exploring to them, find the allies we've seen from even places that we hadn't seen on the stream. For example, we never saw Westron before it happened in the Crema Conclave arc. But that wasn't true for the players because they'd been playing for 2 years before the live stream started. So all of them had been to Westron. They'd all met Vex and Vax's father at least once. Everything we saw in the game still happened. It was still tense and frustrating, but like they had at least met their half-sister prior to the Crema Conclave arc. They had been to Vasselheim in the stream. There's certain things that, like, because you haven't done that for obvious reasons, you want to get to the Briarwood arc as quickly as possible, and you don't want to then say, like, okay, Briarwood arc over. Let's get like 2 or 3 episodes of like winding up for the next arc. It's like, no, you want to get the audience to what you know is going to be the next big thing, which is the Crema Conclave arc. That's
dragons.
Extremely important. So
big dragons.
By necessity, some things have to happen during that arc. How they've individually done that has been really interesting to watch. Be like, okay, you got to do Lara and Cash. They're beloved NPCs. So how do you do that? Now you're going to them because they're monster hunters and you're looking for help. Okay, that makes sense. But like, how do you capture that dynamic? You don't. You change their characterization. You make them much more aggressive so that you're moving the story forward rather than just doing fan service. That was something that was like, oh, I don't know how everyone's going to feel about that. And obviously, I love the version of Cash and Zara who are like much more ride or die for Vox Machina in the live stream. But of course, that's not going to translate well. We have a very different dynamic here. And
Wait,
we got
So they're like more buddy in the stream?
Yeah.
Interesting.
In the stream, they had to like work together to fight some monsters so that everyone could get initiated into the Slayer's Take way before the dragons. There was less of like an audition to like help us with the dragons. It was just like they had there was still tension. Like Vex and Zara had a lot of tension until they ended up bonding about their terrible fathers. So like, but you don't necessarily need that. The actress who plays Zara is also the voice director for the show. So
it's, Mary Elizabeth Glynn.
Mary Elizabeth McGlynn. So she's
I know her because she's big in Star Wars animation. And she's, I believe she's the voice of Orinda Price and Star Wars Rebels.
Oh, I've not seen much of Rebels yet, so that would be why I didn't recognize it. Getting back into Star Wars is a whole other Herculean task that I have ahead of me. But so like that's the kind of thing that like for an adaptation you just need to make changes. Another is the resolution of the Craven Edge story. In the show, basically Craven Edge does kill Grog. And they have to like bring him back to life and wake him up. And he's like, it probably wasn't that bad. And there's like a full like 45-minute long debate with the entire cast trying to convince Grog that he needs to get rid of Craven Edge while he's arguing, no, we know we need to deal with Kevdak. This is the only way I feel comfortable doing it. You can't put a 45-minute conversation into a 22-minute episode of TV. It just doesn't work. And you also don't want to water down the deaths that really matter. That was basically them saying, listen, we did the Vex death as it happened. Almost exactly as it happened on the show. We really changed the Grog one. There are some character deaths that are not going to be character deaths in the final version. Because I think across the campaign, every character of Vox Machina dies at least once. And they've basically already said that's not going to happen. Grog's death was not a death in the show. So
I was wondering about that because I was watching the Nerdist video talking about the Easter eggs of the show. And they're like, oh, here's Pike in the past and her hair's black because she hasn't died and been resurrected. And I was like, what?
That's such a funny one because I think I'm going to be very curious how they describe it. Like, it's a tough one because they're publishing comics right now through Dark Horse where Pike has dark hair and they're probably going to do the death. But the death happened when they saved Sovereign Uriel from being possessed by demons. And they didn't do that. The first time they met Uriel in the cartoon was in the cartoon. And because like the saving him from demons happened pre-stream. It wasn't something that we as the audience saw. And it was, you don't really need it. Yes, Uriel was taken over by the Briarwoods. And basically in the live stream said, this keeps happening to me, I'm going to step down. But like, we also as an audience totally buy it if it happens just the once. And he's like, yeah, I need to step down. Like, yeah. We would totally accept that just as well. You don't need that other story beat. And they very deliberately said, like, when the version of Pike who saves Grog, she says, thank you for saving my grandpa. So there's enough wiggle room there where it's like, it doesn't have to be Pike. It could be another member of Pike's family. They've given themselves that wiggle room. But that's another one where it's like, oof, I don't know where they're going with that. If they may just leave it open-ended. Be like, listen, it's compatible with both headcanons and leave it at that. Or they might down the road because like we might see Pike's family. They did plot Pete later in the story, which probably will do, although you never know.
Honestly, like not knowing the background, like when I saw younger Pike with black hair versus older Pike, I just figured it had something to do with her being a holy person. Like that was how I thought
and that's also
I didn't need a story.
Exactly. That's also totally viable. Like she also could have just pulled a Steve Martin and gone really gray really quickly. That also just happens to people. So
or she might just like dyeing her hair blonde. I don't know.
She might also just have felt like being a blonde, or she was in her rebellious teenage years and wanted to go dark haired. You don't necessarily need an explanation because that's not the point of that scene.
Especially
if they go on later and say, oh, by the way, what we were really setting up was this other thing we're going to do, then fine, great. But if not, they've got enough legal room that they can play with that if they have to.
And especially for me, because like, I think the difference between season 1, season 2 for me was there is so much information this season. And like the first week really bogged me down personally because there are there's the introductions of the dragons, and we're popping different places, and there's also all these gods, and we're meeting all these new characters, like the old man who fights Grog, and there's also the matron of ravens, and like all this is happening. We're meeting like Zara and Cash, and it was like a really huge information dump for me, and it was a little overwhelming. And season 2 really didn't start working really well until we just got into the characters, doing the character things. Because to me, like they are the heart of the story and they are the drive. And for me, like the focus on the journeys of the characters is what made this season so incredibly good. As I like Percy and Pike, and I'm glad that they had somewhat of a backseat this season. It never felt unbalanced. Like Percy and Pike were still doing major things.
Pike
but
especially.
I don't. My shipper heart was happy all season long across the boards.
Yeah.
If Cupith and Vax do not kiss, I will do nothing because it's a TV show, but it's very big sad with myself.
You will be upset. Yes, I understand.
I will be upset.
That is, by the way, the right approach to not take it to any further levels. But no,
showrunners owe you nothing, by the way.
Hey, man, art owes you nothing. Artists should be responsible with their platforms. Art owes you nothing, is my feeling. Which is why certain fantasy wizard creators are as disappointing as they are because of what they do with their platform. Disappointing isn't the word.
Your popcorn video is probably one of my favorite pieces of media so far this year.
That was a fun one. That was a fun one to make. For those who don't know, there was a bunch of drama in the D&D space that only lasted a month, but man, it felt like longer.
It was a month.
That was a rough month.
That was a month.
Yeah.
But like the characters just like really carried the season for me. Especially like I'm so happy to get stuff with Grog because coming out of season 1, I felt like he was the one character that didn't really do anything in season 1. So it was really great to have time with each of them.
Yeah.
And I will say one of the few spoilers that I did look into, which wrecked me, was my favorite character, who is Vax, and his fate. And I'm not okay.
In season 1 of Legend of Vox Machina, there's the moment when Keyleth gets zapped by Lady Briarwood and there's no healing magic and they have to save her life and like get her away from where it was. And that was Vex in the show.
Oh, really?
So that was a big moment for them, like telling the audience like, hey, we might change some stuff, but the big beats will stay probably the same, but they might not. The fact that they did Kaylee with Scanlan in the bed, I wasn't sure about for obvious reasons. I don't know how you don't, but like they've changed things before and they just moved and then the first appearance of her was in Western. I was like, oh, so we skipped the bed scene. Oh, okay. No, we're still going to do it. We're just going to do it later. Fair enough.
I have a lot of mixed feelings about that. Seeing like in hindsight, like knowing who Kaylee is.
Yeah.
And on one hand, it's icky, but on the other hand, it's supposed to be icky. Yeah. Because it is showing the flaw of Scanlan's character.
Yeah.
And so it's really well done. And that's the other thing about art. It should make you feel things. And the scene made me feel icky, which means it did it because it's supposed to be real big ick. Big ick.
And in fairness, the guy who plays Sam, the guy who plays Scanlan, is one of the creators of the show. He's one of the people who's like in the room every day. Like he's one of the writers. He's like, he and Travis are like basically, I don't know if they're technically the showrunners, but they're the people in Critical Role who are the most hands-on with the cartoon. So like for him to say like, yeah, this moment that happened to my character did not make my character look good in a pretty profound way was really important to the character. So it has to be there because that's really faithful to who he was. Scanlan's a tricky character to adapt because they really, I don't know if there are technically more jokes in Legend of Vox Machina than there were in Campaign 1. But because the episodes are as short as they are, it feels like a higher density of them. But they've also, because of how we've all changed how we discuss this subject in the past few years for very reasonable reasons, the jokes are more deliberate about how he is a pervert and less about his, like, it used to be much more like overt flirting with Pike. And very forward in like propositions. And Ashley was like playing along with it. She was like, not like she was going for it, but she was like having fun being the straight man. But when you don't have that same dynamic, you don't have everyone at the table laughing, you can't see the smile on her face because they're characters, they're cartoons now, it doesn't work. I would even argue that he realized pretty quickly it doesn't work for everyone in the audience, which is why he's shifted to more, like Scanlan does a lot of scatological humor in the live stream, because I think he felt like, oh, not everyone, I can't hear the audience's reaction, so I can't gauge these jokes to them. So the shift in Scanlan's humor has been like interesting to watch, because it's a tough thing to get right. And I was like, oh, I would love if they toned some of this down. But then they still do the bed scene. And it's like, okay, I totally see why you have to keep doing Scanlan as the Lothario, who's like, you have to show how like this is his character and really go for it, so that when we get to that point, it's like, yeah, he would have.
Yeah, and
you gotta believe it. He wouldn't, not if he known, obviously. Like, that's not what I'm saying, but like, you have to believe that he would put himself in that situation, and also that at some point he would have had a kid, bare minimum.
So, looking back at the season as a whole, do you have like a particular favorite episode or some of your favorite moments from season 2?
Man, that first episode is absolute.
It's brutal.
Brilliant. It's so. That's the thing is,
so
there are some moments in the adaptation where you just don't know how things are going to go. And I will say, like, for me, like, I totally get that you can't do the original Craven Edge resolution on the live stream, like that you had in the live stream in a cartoon. Just doesn't work. But like, oh, I just like that scene so much, and it was a bummer not to have it. And I knew you weren't going to. Like, I'm not foolish. I've watched a lot of adaptations, but I was like, I really like the original Craven Edge ending, though. Like, I totally get what they're doing, and it works, and I'm glad people are enjoying it. But for me, it's like, but the original. But then, like, which is just like, I have to separate those things. There has to be the version of me that's just like a fan of it and enjoys what it was, and the part of me that's like, yeah, but you've worked in Hollywood, you know that this was never going to happen. Like, they had to make concessions. So for years, I have been preparing myself that the Chroma Conclave attack wasn't going to be what I pictured. Not that it was going to be bad, but just like, it's not going to be what I had in my head. And then it is what it is. We've all seen adaptations where it just wasn't what it is. And oh my God, it was so good. It was so incredible. It was more brutal than because we got to see it. We got to see it, and like they went further. They had the actual like acid dripping off the dragon's wings.
The acid dragon was like the worst.
And they showed us the death of Uriel. We heard about that later on, but the fact that we actually see it happen, and they go to like that title card, not the full intro scene, that title card, the amazing music from Neil Acree, like over that, and like the way they like bring Castle down on screen with like this super laser blast was like a huge reminder, like, oh, yes, you guys have killed the dragon. You are not ready for this. I was so impressed with that sequence. They went all out on everything in that scene. Like, this is the one that I would like, listen, gonna work for the story. It just may not be what I imagined, but man, they got it right. It was so good. And honestly, the same with the end of the season. These are a couple fights with Kevdak and with Umbrasyl that I have a lot of affection for. And yeah, they're different, but man, they pack the exact same punch. And they didn't make any major deviations. The way that Vax and Scanlan get inside Umbrasyl was a little different.
I was wondering if that's how it actually happened.
Because they teleport in the original. They teleport inside, and they wind up on different sides of a stomach lining. And because they rolled just so poorly, man, it is difficult to understand how intense that fight was in the live stream, but not really, because you saw a version of it. But then it's like, yeah, well, he doesn't have the teleporting power. It would solve too many problems. They gave it to him really briefly for season 1 via a potion, but that was just for that one scene in the house when he's like bouncing around the house and then becomes a Triceratops. Like, and that was a very like, I was like, oh, okay. It was a very conscious choice to like not give him too much power and kind of keep it all consistent, because D&D has its own very specific set of rules. And if you try to just drop them one for one into another piece of media, are they going to read? Is it going to make sense? It'd be like, oh, of course he can play his music, so of course he can teleport. Like, what? Does that make sense? So there are certain things you have to change. So then it's like, okay, that makes sense. Then you use the hand to get inside, and it's clever and inventive, and you still get exactly that moment.
And it's his character.
It's in his character. Heck, we saw when he was treating Grog with the pellets that he had already. that I believe is a bit of foreshadowing on their part. I'm not sure, but it does seem that they were like, we know where the season is going.
I'm gonna wait and not ask about that one. That's a little bit of But I'm also
what I mean is, I think when they gave Grog the medicine ball in like episode 8, I think they knew like they were going to do this trick in episode 11, and they needed to like.
I thought you meant that like somehow Scanlan was going to be inside. My God. Oh my gosh.
I misrepresented what I was intending to.
I was very. Anyway, so some of my favorites. For me, I just loved everything with the Matron of Ravens.
So I was about to say as well. Yeah. Especially that scene in episode 11 and 12.
Yeah.
Where we actually get to know her a little better, and then we get the wings reveal, which again, they moved forward, which makes more sense. Like, instead of like doing some weird D&D randomness, like having Scanlan turn Grog into an eagle and catch Vax, and then later on, Gilmore be like, hey, I think your armor has wings, let's try this. Like, just make it way more dynamic and exciting by putting those events together was really smart.
And it was just such a beautiful scene for Vax, just like watching him struggle all season, like really not knowing this path that he stumbled into and having to own it. And that very beautiful moment of just being like, your job is to enjoy life, like to love life, and to help people with death, because death gives life worth, which was really beautiful. And I like that shift from her being almost like this terrifying horror monster in episode 1 to being this like very beautiful, benevolent, kind goddess at the end, and like giving Vax that purpose. I'm also very scared for his future in him and Keyleth, which makes me sad. But no, we won't go into ships right now. But actually, that was the other thing. I did like how all the ships got a little bit of focus. I think Vex and Percy are cute. I have snuck ahead and know that they get married, so I'm very excited about that. And the other scene I really loved was Vex facing the tree jerk. What's his name? Sandor? Sander? Sander.
No, you had it right, Sandor.
She's going to sand him down, because that scene was just incredibly powerful. And it really spoke to me as someone who's had some like really not great relationships. It really spoke to me on a lot of levels. And it's one of those things where like media can help you realize things. To be honest, I'd been struggling with my own character in my... Hit my mic. To be honest, I've been struggling with my own character in my tabletop that I'm playing for the first time. And I was like, I watched that scene. I was like, this is what I've been missing. I've been missing her insecurities. Because she's been on more Scanlan-like character when she's more of a Keyleth.
Okay. Interesting. I like that.
And so like, I just had this like huge reveal, and I really loved that scene for it, because it really got down to Vex's insecurities, and it was incredibly powerful to realize that this thing you want so much, and this love from a person you want so much, is never going to happen. And that's where I feel like Vox Machina gets a lot of this right. Like, we're having these adults deal with these like very adult problems. And it's beautiful and it's powerful. And I just really enjoyed that every character had something like that this season. But definitely the twins and Grog. I loved everything with Grog. And
getting to see how awful he was.
Yeah, to come from a place of being so awful, because he's such a sweet baby at like all times, but to see him just being brutally awful, but to find his strength. And like, on one hand, as you said, it's tropey when he was like, my strength is in my friends. Then they counterbalance that with an awesome roof reveal of Vox Machina.
I thought that worked really well too.
And so they took something that was cheesy, like I love My Little Pony. It can be cheesy to be like, my friendship is my strength. They like made it
the real strength is the friends we made along the way.
But like they find these like unique ways to like use these tropes that I really love about it.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that the Vex, Sandor, Percy, and I'm blanking on her father's name.
I call him Ass.
Sildor, I believe is his name. Having trouble because Sildor lives in Singorn, and then they go from there to Sandor. I believe Sildor is his name.
Purposely make the twins Faller and the tree jerk's names similar.
Not back. Matt very well might have. It's very possible. I would not know that for sure. But a lot of the language that's used in that poor broken Vexalia is straight from the game. You're just like all the rest was a distillation.
Poor broken Vexalia hit me personally, like in the gut.
I didn't remember.
That was painful.
I didn't remember that as a direct quote until I saw one of those side-by-sides on YouTube that people were like, oh, here's the moment. I was like, wow, he really did just say it. Like, he really did just call her that. Wow. Like, Matt knew exactly what he was doing. And then for them to, like, go all in and have him say in the show, you're just like all the rest. Yep. We know who this guy is. But also, like, the giving her the title. Percy giving her the title. And here's the thing. When that happens...
I am not okay over that moment. I am not okay.
And when that happens...
I can tell you the way I scraped. I paused and I was like, wait. Whitestone is his home. Did he just like propose? I had a moment, Mike.
He gave her a place in his home, a place in his domain. And when it happened in the stream, it was at their very first live game in front of an audience. You can imagine the minute and a half reaction to that. But when you're not adapting that, and it's not just like this epic mic drop moment, the writer sat down and like, okay, but like, would Sildor care about this? And the answer is yes, if he was honest about who he was. Like, if he was telling the truth about what he wants from them, yes. But he's not. So he doesn't. And for him to just be like, ugh, a title you made up. It's like, man, they gave you the one thing that you have been claiming you wanted from your children, which was respectability, for them to be a part of noble society. And the fact that you didn't feel it was good enough means this was never about that. It never was. And that was something that they've talked about since, to be like, yeah, it's not fixed. It's not just all better because of that. Like, and not that it wasn't the live stream either. Like, it was still very cold to them. But he was, oh, okay, I will change this. And in the cartoon, he was like, no. And it's like, oh, so you are really a liar. Like, you're lying to yourself most of all, that you think there is a world where something could happen that you would honor your children. You wouldn't. You didn't.
Yeah,
you're a liar. And that was such a smart change to make these characters so clear.
I'm going to put that whole man in the garbage can and then set the garbage can on fire and then let Trinket pee on it. That's what I want.
And to tie everything that Sondor says to that. Because in the live stream, he also goes on a digression about how, like, when she rescued Trinket, she, like, killed the poachers and, like, felt this, like, guilt about that. Dax wasn't there. It was just her, and she never told him. And I think they smartly were like, okay, but, like, if we as an audience watched them torture this bear and then she killed them all, we would cheer her on forever. Why would she feel guilty about that? Not actually, like, that's tying into something that was going through the character's mind in the live stream that just doesn't translate to a different medium.
Yeah.
It's like, no, make this about the father thing. Make this about pushing the character forward and dealing with their real baggage. Not to say that wasn't present in the live stream, but to put much more focus on that was a really smart decision.
Coming back into it, was there anything that you wish they did better in the season, or like any gripes about the season or the show of how they handled anything?
I don't even know if I don't think gripes is the right word. There are things that I don't know if I needed to see that dude's poop in season 1 when he got up off of the thing. I don't know if I needed to see that particular one. I never necessarily needed to see Scanlan's scrotum, but that's just differences in humor style. Same with, like, Scanlan's jokes are, like, they feel like a lot more in the cartoon, but I think we're probably through a lot of them. I think actually they found a much better balance in season 2 to be like, hey, like, this is a defense mechanism, making it very clear in episode, whatever it was, 7, when he's with Grog, and Pike compliments him for being a caregiver, and he immediately goes into his mode, and she's so turned off instantly.
I like, okay, actually a lot in season 1, because I really liked the moments when in season 1 with Scanlan had those quieter moments. He would fall back on the jokes. So I thought that was very well set up in season 1 to be executed even better in season 2.
Yeah, I think season 2 found a better balance of that than just my personal, again, this is all personal taste. My personal taste for season 1 was like, these are a bit much. I don't know if I needed all of as many anal bead jokes necessarily, but again, that's just differences in humor styling.
It's different with the song, though, because the song is great.
Yeah, but and that song does make it go down smoother. I wish I'd chosen my words differently than that. I have to really compliment how they've done Keyleth. I think Keyleth is a character who a lot of people just didn't get in the live stream. She's the least tropey. She's Avatar from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and, like, she's aware of that. She didn't do it on purpose, but she is. But, like, a lot of people didn't understand, like, why is there everyone else in Vox Machina for the live stream is either a badass or very funny, or in the case of Grog, both. And they're different kinds of badass necessarily. You've got Vax sneaking ahead, you've got Vex with her bow and arrow, you've got Percy, who's clever and also has a badass gun and also does revenge. And Keyleth doesn't fit that. And I think a lot of people didn't get that. They didn't understand that, like, her character's on a journey of discovery. But I think that worked so perfectly for the medium they were translating to in a way that I was so delighted to see. Because
Keyleth was actually my initial favorite character before Vax slid in there. And, like, they share that because I like that. But that's the thing, that she was that kind of moral compass of just, like, maybe we should, like, her and Pike together, but even Pike had, like, her rough moments of, like, brawling and drinking. So I thought it was great because I love having this character of just being like, I'm going to push you in the lava. I'm so sorry that I'm killing you. Oh, God. Yep. Like, that's such a funny character compared to everybody else.
Yeah, I think they've done such a great job with that character. I've been so impressed. Like, I have been impressed with how they've done all the characters. I was very worried about, because all of them can translate poorly, except for Percy. I'm sorry, it's true. He's tailor-made for animation. He feels like he's lifted out of the anime that none of us watched. Like,
yeah, that's why he was so funny.
He was always going to be fine. Everyone else, I was just like, is Grog not going to feel right? No, he does. Is Scanlan not going to feel? Oh, no, Scanlan works. Pike, I was really worried about because there's so much about Pike that was played by Matt, or she was just absent. Like, no, Pike feels like a whole cohesive, complete character, and it works, and she's really interesting and exciting. Vax could have been one note. Vex could have just been, like, really unpleasant. Like, there's a lot of characters they could have just gotten wrong. And, man, they have such a clear characterization for all of them. And being able to spend more time on them in season 2 was really nice.
Oh, yeah.
And my only thing is like, there's certain scenes we'll never get a chance to see. But then again, at the end of episode 9, I thought, we're not going to see some Kaylee scenes because we've skipped them. And then we got them anyway. Okay, cool. We might come back and do some of these moments when the time is right. And if not, I feel a lot better about the choices that were made. Doesn't mean that I still don't have my personal preferences, but then again, I'm the weirdo who's like, oh man, I love this one episode of Critical Role where they just sit and make a plan for an hour. That's not going to be translated to the cartoon, and it's not supposed to be. That's not. I'm very strange, and that is my preference. But so it's very weird. It's a very weird thing to try to adapt, and they've done such a good job of it.
For me, like the two things I have that are like gripes. One is actually both of them have nothing to do with the show itself, and one I don't even know what to do with, which is why I'm coming to you to help me with this. The first thing is I'm very on the fence and I don't really like the way they drop the episodes 3 at a time. I'm not a fan of the binge versus weekly and the hybrid of the two. I wouldn't mind having the 2 for the season opener, 2 for the season closer, and then weekly for the rest of them. And a lot of that is just, I love the show so much. I don't want it to be done in a month.
Yeah, I get that.
And so it's just this kind of weird hybrid of like the binge weekly method. And like on week 2, we were already halfway done.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm just like one of those fans that really like being able to sit like weekly and like talk with people and like watch the videos and the Easter eggs and like have that like fandom experience. Cause I think when I wrote my initial review for season 2, because season 1 was so long ago, it was a year ago and last January, I forgot so much and I didn't have time to rewatch the entire season. So like when I finished my season 1 rewatch after I wrote it, I was like, oh, Gilmore can do magic. Oops. I forgot.
But it had been a year. And it was one scene, too.
Yeah, and even then, it was along the lines of, like, I wasn't sure if there was the magical items in his shop being the security. So, like, it was, hate that the show is over so fast in this kind of, like, hybrid 3 episode at a time binge sort of thing. And I don't know if that would be fixed for Mighty 9, because when is Mighty 9 coming out? Are we going to have 2 shows running, like one in the winter, one in the summer, or something like that?
I don't know. I think it's going to be a while before we see Mighty 9. For animation takes a long time. I honestly think that they got very lucky that they had basically started working on 2 seasons at once for Vox Machina. If they're green light for season 3 really quickly, I still would be surprised if we saw it next year.
What they did is they ordered it together so they could be working on both at the same time. Like that's how it usually works. That's why something like Velma has 2 seasons, because they probably ordered both at the same time and then split it. So for be in process.
Basically for Kickstarter, they kickstarted a season of TV and then Amazon was like, we'll pick it up and we'll give you a second season. We don't know how far along. They were probably pretty early on. And then when the show premiered, which is a couple of years after production, they got green light for season 3. I think unfortunately that does mean we probably won't get season 3 in 2024, or at least not very early. Going to be a couple of years. Mighty 9, I'm personally expecting 2025, 2026. That would be my guess, just because I know animation takes so. And if it comes early, I'll be very pleasantly surprised. Okay. As for the schedule, I've been very impressed with how they've handled that. I think that they, especially for season 1, have really smart cliffhangers. Season 2 as well. They've been pretty well placed. But I think a lot about how TV shows are released and the method and how everyone's just sort of trying stuff right now. I don't know what TV's going to look like in 3 years.
Yeah.
Like, fully, like, because like my wife and I are finally catching up on some TV. We're watching Only Murders in the Building, and after episode 3, it's like scenes from the season. I was like, wait, hang on. Did all 3 of these episodes come out at once? Is this every 3? No, they just did 3 at once, and then they did weekly. What is happening? Why is everyone just trying stuff? Like, and the Disney Plus shows have been doing that too, where every once in a while they're like, listen, we need to give you a couple episodes so you know what to expect. It's like, why don't you just make your pilot so that people know what to expect, like people did in television for 100 years or 50 years? But everyone just trying things. In fairness, the 3 episodes at a time apparently worked for Arcane. So it's not like it had never been done, but they're really committing to it. And it's like, you're right, they don't have to. Like, they could go weekly, and I think we'd all be on board with it. But, man, everyone's just sort of trying stuff, and it frustrates me so much that it's like, and Netflix especially, it's like, come on, just stop dropping everything on the same day. But that's such a larger industry conversation where just no one knows what the right answer is. They're all just trying stuff that has worked. And it's, what if we do the thing that worked for 70 years? What if we went back to that? Could we try it again?
I'd be down for like weekly. Like or maybe like having like an hour-long finale or something like that.
Yeah, I thought the success of Mandalorian was a bullet through the heart of everything dropping all on the same day, and that wasn't the case. We'll see. I don't know. I think about this all the time, Hope. We could have a whole other conversation about
yes,
this.
we could, actually.
I don't know. I don't get it. I understand why they're doing it this time. I don't know if we'll see it the same with Mighty Nine, but it's such a symptom of a larger thing, which is like, hey, everyone, you just go back to weekly. I promise. We'll all watch the shows.
Hey, Mike, if you ever just want a space to like go off about this, let me know and I'll fire up the StreamYard and just let you go and like listen.
Remind me of this the next time a show that I love comes back with some wacky scheduling, and I'll just come and be like, Hope, we got to talk about this. Why are we still doing it? I'd
be so down to listen to that. And yeah, the thing is, like, I think a unique problem for someone like me who is a new fan, which is spoilers. Because on one hand, this is information that's been around for so long.
Yeah.
And it's been around for years. But at the same time, as a new fan, if you like whatever, I think it was week 2 where they met the second Sphinx and they met Mythcarver. Yeah. After watching the episode and like Priscilla took the sword, I went online and somebody wrote something along the lines of like, man, I can't wait to see Scanlan kill the dragon with that thing. And I was just like, oh, I guess Scanlan's gonna kill the dragon with Mythcarver.
What's funny about that is that I don't think was a spoiler until it turned out to be true. Because in the campaign, Scanlan used Mythcarver like twice, and he did not kill a dragon. So the fact that they gave him the kill for Umbrasyl, I think I think that person may have been a new fan. But the thing is, you can't tell. You don't know what's a spoiler and what's just someone saying, boy, I sure hope this happens. Because like, how do you filter? Because someone doesn't say like, man, I can't wait to see Scanlan kill Mythcarver, like, kill that thing with Mythcarver. A thing that I'm assuming happens because I haven't watched the hundreds of hours of live. Like, they don't,
and then it happened. And so, like, and then there's other things like when Vax first met the Matron Ravens.
Yeah,
somebody had a riddle on the lines of like, and this is the beginning of Vax dying, and I was like, what?
That's rude. That's like my friend who went online the day Force Awakens came out, and it was like a picture of it was like a screen grab of Han Solo's death, and it was like Han Solo being killed by his son, Ben. And it's like, that's every spoiler in the movie all in one shot. How did you do it? How did you do that? Now, I'm saying there's a lot more to that spoiler than you might think there is.
I figure, but like, it's like this weird place to be as a new fan because on one hand, like this information has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
It's been around for years. Somehow these things happen. But I was trying to think of a really good comparison to it. And the closest I could get to was the MCU.
Yeah.
Because all these movies are adaptations of these comics that have been around for years. But the difference is the size of the fandom. I used to manage a comic book store. And so when these movies would come out, like, of course, fans who were like newbies and normies wanted to come see the comics the movies were based on. But it's like the equivalent of the MCU is like a lake. And I would say that the Vox Machina fandom is like a backyard pool. So when
much
it comes
smaller
to
space because then spoilers pass a lot more freely there.
And it's a lot easier to run into the spoilers because there was definitely times where I would meet people who were like fans of the MCU, but not really know the comics, and they wouldn't know the spoilers, even though this is information that's been around. Like you could read Infinity War and know like who died, who didn't. And of course,
on Wikipedia.
If people wanted to seek out that information. But it's so much harder to like be like, oh, I want to see somebody who did some cool. Friend of mine does Vox Machina artwork. And I went to go see her artwork and somebody was just like that. I think that's where I ran into the Vex dying one. And it's just this like weird thing. And I don't really know as a newbie how best to handle spoilers when it's information that's been around for years. So I guess this is a roundabout way of saying just like, hey, be more aware of us new fans. I don't know, but like, I also don't want to police people with information that's been around for years. So what would you say?
It's tough. I just say that it's very difficult to know where to go that's safe. And my hope is that as the show goes on, it will be easier to do that. But you're right. Right now, when you look up Chroma Conclave, you can see how it ends really easily. And I don't want to just tell people, like, just don't Google it. Because, like, what? Are you kidding?
When you're pulling up like on Tumblr and people are just like, here's the things of like how it's happened, like it's a little bit harder because I do want to participate in the fandom. I do want to be like active and have like conversations like I'm having with you.
Yeah.
But it's also this like weird space of I don't have time to binge hundreds of hours worth of content, which is actually why I really like your videos because as a plug, but also I really like your videos because I plan to watch them up till Briarwoods and then jump in there. But you're still giving me like the background and like what's important in this little bite size in your series.
Yeah, I'm very aware that it is not a replacement for the show, not really intended to be, but for some people it is a nice, like, oh, this is better than just reading the description on Critical Role Wiki. It's like, yeah, fair enough. I don't have an answer, unfortunately. I take comfort in the fact that there are probably other fandoms that have been through this before, that where the new fans don't want to know everything going in. This is one that is very tricky because Critical Role fans are very passionate, as all fans are, but it's such a strange thing. Again, it's because this is such a strange thing to adapt, and like there's no precedent for this, that people don't really know how to behave in a reasonable way necessarily, compared to, we all know that it's poor form to tell people who just walked out of a movie how the next book ends. We have a lot of experience. We have more than 100 years of movies having been made off of books to know like that's a really rude thing to do. But then again, people knew that in the 70s, and yet people were still writing Frodo lives on subway walls. So is that the same as dropping it in the YouTube comments now? Like, people will still find a way to express that stuff. And especially because this is like not something that's happened before. And it's also tough because, like, arguably you do want to be caught up on some of the stuff if you want to watch Campaign 3. So you want to make sure the information is available for people who want to know that, because there's a lot of Campaign 1 references in Campaign 3.
Yeah, I found out that Gamgeely, Billy Boyd's character, is actually like a Mighty Nine character. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, there's some connections there. And and people are being, I think, careful not to spoil too much about that, which is nice. Then again, it depends on what online space you're in. I'm sure that's not true for everyone.
Yeah.
Me, I was just like, oh, cool, Matt's going to play that character in Mighty Nine. That's good to know. But yeah, I don't know. Unfortunately, hope that is... You have diagnosed the problem. I unfortunately just don't know how it is... I can't just tell people don't go on Tumblr, because that's not really reasonable.
I guess, like, maybe, like, just please avoid big spoilers, you know? That's all I request.
Be conscious of how you're expressing, because I understand that people want to say, oh my gosh, I'm so excited this is going to lead to this. I cannot believe. But, like, there's ways to say it where you're not also saying what the end of the thing is. Like, it's tough. Like, because people, they don't really have a language. You would think they would, but this campaign's been around long enough, but because it is so impenetrable, sometimes there is no other way to communicate. You can get the feeling. I understand the sentiment. I don't know how else to talk about this other than to talk about it. But, like, my only advice would be, like, try to find a way to be aware that there are new audience members who don't necessarily want that experience.
Yeah. Speaking of things coming into the end of it, I am so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for giving us your time. And Mike, where can people find you? People
can find me on YouTube at SupergeekMike. In theory, I'm also on social media at that handle, less so in practice. But you know what? I might start using some of them again at some point when I have time. But definitely on YouTube, every Monday and Thursday, I make videos about Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing games. And on every other Thursday, I do a video about an old episode of Critical Role and break down the things that we can steal from it or learn from it, things they did well, things that may not work for your games, things that are useful to know about what was going on behind the scenes, and give that advice and insight, hopefully, to people who are interested.
Yes. They're really good. And they're very helpful. And I can't recommend them enough. Like, they're super good. Go watch them.
Also, do you want to know just a little quick piece of trivia about the Chroma Conclave adaptation?
Yes.
The episode of the animated series where the Chroma Conclave attacked aired 7 years and 1 day after the episode of the live stream where it happened.
That's so cool.
Almost to the day.
Oh, That they were probably behind the scenes going like, come on, man, one more day.
I honestly just think it's like, it wouldn't have quite worked because Friday was the 20th and Thursday was the 21st, like, because of the release day. But the
They always
fact that
dropped early, though. Like, mine always dropped at like
so
Thursday.
technically it was 2 days instead of 1 day because it came out a day early. But if you go from Thursday to Thursday, because it did drop early, it is 7 years. That's how I found it. And that's just because they knew, like, hey, it's the beginning of a new year in 2016. Let's start this new story arc, or at least Matt did. So it just worked out really well. I just think that's neat. There's nothing we can learn from that. I just think it's neat.
Thank you for sharing, though. I think that's very neat as well. If you want to know all my stuff, the go there, I have a link tree on my Twitter. You can find all the stuff I do. And if you want to see me learn tabletop for the first time, I'm part of a podcast called For Light and Dice. And we are a real play Star Wars 5e tabletop podcast. All the people we killed are not our fault.
Totally. No RPG player has ever said that before.
They really are accidents, though, Mike. You don't understand.
Okay.
They were framed by the Huns.
That actually does make sense.
Yeah, it's not our fault.
Scoundrels.
Mike, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching, and stay geeky, everybody. Bye.